Good afternoon, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Good. Thank you all so much for joining us here for a discussion on intelligent urban infrastructure. My name is Kristin Musulin. I am the senior editor of Smart Cities Dive. We are a digital media publication covering the US smart city landscape for an audience of city leaders and industry leaders. And I will be your moderator for this panel. So as an attendee of this conference, you likely either work in or are interested in the development of smart cities. Therefore, you understand that infrastructure is a backbone for every city. And intelligent urban infrastructure can refer to many different systems, from building systems to cloud infrastructure, that are helping to shape the connected and innovative future of urban areas. So as a journalist, I often study and research these systems and how they benefit the lives of our urban residents, but nobody is more appropriate to speak on them than the panelists who are joining me on stage today. So to my very far right down here, we have Dave Hopping, the president and CEO of Siemens Smart Infrastructure. To his left, we have Faye DiMassimo, the specialist leader of state and local transportation at Deloitte. Then we have Rook, the Senior Vice President of IoT at Sprint. And to my immediate right, we have Salmasi, the Chairman and CEO of Veea. So before we get into questions toward the end of the discussion, I've asked each of our panelists to give a brief introduction of their work and illustrate for us the impact that it has as it relates to urban infrastructure. So Dave, I think we're going to start with you.
Yep, thank you so much. First of all, it's an honor to be here today and representing Siemens. You probably know this already, but more people live in cities today than they do in rural areas for the first time in history, and over 1 million people a week are moving to cities. So this is causing a tremendous stress on the infrastructure of our cities, and we all see some of it, but some of it we don't. Some of it we see, the congestion, the transportation issues, maybe the power outages. But there's also challenges that you don't see, and that is new emerging technologies coming into play at the grid edge, such as e-mobility infrastructure that's putting a lot of stress on the electrical grid, or how buildings operate and the congestion of buildings downtown and the need to build less square footage in buildings. And so we in Siemens Smart Infrastructure are put together to try to solve some of these challenges in the marketplace. In fact, we're so passionate about it that we changed our company name last October, merged a couple divisions, and our new division name is Siemens Smart Infrastructure. So where we really focus in the marketplace is on the slide above, but this is in the intelligent building area. This is in the distributed energy space. This is in the power and renewable energy area, intelligent electric grids, e-mobility infrastructure, and the convergence of all of these that's taking place within cities. And really, where the smart comes into play is the added value that we can add by connecting really the physical world to the digital world to create more value, more transparency, more information. So this is what we're all about, and this is our angle when it comes into infrastructure and meeting some of the challenges in cities. So pleasure to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Next up is Faye.
All right. Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share with you Deloitte's approach to smart city and the future of mobility. One of the things that I think is most interesting about having had a couple of other panels, especially the panel of mayors that kicked us off with the event today, is how much of the thought process, the issues of the day, the approaches that the mayors were talking about that you will see reflected in Deloitte's 360-degree smart city framework. It is a comprehensive model that supports that interrelated nature of all of the things that make up a smart city. And I think it also very much points to what we heard mayors say, as a smart city is different in different places. Smart communities are different in different places. And the approach that we've developed looks across a city's entire operations in order to make sure that we're using technology to produce those outcomes, which we know are so important. I think what's really most important about this slide, though, is if you go to the center of it, it's engagement and inclusion driven. The truth of the matter is that smart cities are not driven by technology, but they're driven by people. And they're driven by the services and the outcomes and the approaches that we are using to engage people and to have their support in how we're going to move these processes forward. In addition to the 360-degree framework approach, we also have performed a Deloitte City Mobility Index. If you haven't had a chance to look at this, I strongly encourage you to visit our website and learn more about this. Cities, over 50 cities around the world, were assessed on 3 key themes, and you see those key themes here: performance and resilience, vision and leadership, and service and inclusion. And it was really about how cities achieve mobility. And mobility is another one of those things that cuts across many different things. It's not just about transportation, but it is genuinely about how we connect with each other. The urban mobility needs to be efficient, it needs to be innovative, and it needs to be accessible to all residents. That is a key that we've heard over and over and over today, is how much being inclusive and being equitable matters. Again, it's back to, these are people-driven processes, not technology-driven processes. And then lastly, I wanted to share some of our thought leadership pieces related to those 2 very key pieces of work in the smart city space. We're a recognized market leader in the eminence and thought leadership that's related, and I won't go through all of these particular offerings here, but again, encourage you to please visit our website and learn more, and I'll be glad to be around and chat with anyone who's interested afterwards as well, and look forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much. And we have Ivo from Sprint.
Yeah, thank you. I'm here to actually introduce a very simple concept. It's called the digital pavement. For generations, when cities wanted to attract new economic development and activity to their cities, they were to invest in railroads, airports, roads, subway systems, and what have you. In the new world that is predominantly digital, what we do together with cities is invest in the digital pavement. So we have created what we like to call the Curiosity IoT network, which is the very first network that is built for software. So not just for smartphones, for software. That led to a few consequences. Number 1, it is a fully dedicated network. We separate the traffic from the smartphone traffic and route it to its own core. Then you virtualize it completely, which basically means you've now turned an entire network into software. That allows you to run your network everywhere. Not just out of a Sprint facility, out of a public data center, or even out of our customer data centers, or in those assets that real estate companies have all throughout the city. And since we've built our network as software, and we run it on the same layer that powers the cloud, which is bare metal, we allow all developers, customers, and so on to deploy their software right onto the same core that also runs your network. Then you stick in real mobile 5G, and you've just built what we like to think of the digital pavement that attracts economic activity to your city and a platform to build your digital services upon.
Wonderful, thank you. Lastly, Alan, would you mind passing that?
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So in terms of smart city infrastructure, one of the key drivers in terms of delivering connectivity, communications, and applications, which is really the foundations of any smart city, is a high density, high performance, high capacity, wireless coverage type of a system with both indoor and outdoor type of coverage to support all of the different applications that typically we support in a smart city. Smart cities have very many unique requirements. Obviously, any solution that goes into a smart city has to be scalable. It has to provide for real-time, actionable insights. It has to effectively provide for intelligent and dynamic type of processing of applications at the edge, meaning supporting AI and machine learning types of applications. It needs to be distributed and decentralized to provide for fault tolerance, because at the end of the day, if there's a matter of mission critical applications or life and death, you can't afford to have any downtime. And then at the end of the day, these networks have to be highly secure for all of the city applications, all of the cybersecurity types of applications. In this slide, I'm showing you one of the projects that we are involved in. Basically, the city that we are working with has created a data hub. The data hub is collecting a lot of data from many, many different applications for water system management, for waste management, energy management, parking and traffic management, and so on and so forth. There are numerous applications that are effectively generating terabytes of data, if not petabytes of data, on an hourly basis. And they literally told us that if we can't process this data at the edge, right now the data is just coming to our data center and it's dropping right down to the floor of the data center because we just can't keep up with the data ingestion fast enough. On this picture, you see three different arms. One of them is effectively the management and supervisory control of the network for the city. Another one is to effectively have actionable insights through analytics and visualization. And the third one that is probably, in my mind, the most important one that they have introduced into the concept is the idea of effectively having a flexible edge that can support third-party applications. So both the city as well as many of their third-party developers are developing many, many different applications that would run at the edge. This requires what we call multi-access edge computing, or MEC for short. The MEC was adopted at Mobile World Congress in Shanghai a few months ago as a must-have for 5G by many of the major network operators and as well as equipment providers. And the idea is to pre-processing of as much data as we can at the edge. And the reason is that there are certain critical pain points that we are trying to address. One is that cloud computing is not cost effective. Most of the smart cities will go broke within the first year if they're going to send all the data up to the cloud, even if they send it to their own data centers. It's all the CCTV streaming cameras. It's all the IoT sensors that are sending data to either data centers or to the cloud. The second major pain point is that cloud computing is not effectively real-time for many of the latency-sensitive applications. Third point is that right now, most of these applications are being served by a rack of equipment sitting in some closet somewhere in the city, and effectively that's the equivalent of the edge computing that many people offer. The fourth issue is that for many of the critical IoT applications, you can afford to lose your connection to the network. The ISP connection is a must-have. The fourth item is that many of these sensors that we are deploying throughout the city could basically become a point of vulnerability with a lot of malware and a lot of effectively security issues that will create huge headaches for the CIOs of the city. So there's a long list of basically requirements or effectively reasons for doing edge computing. And in our company, we have developed a product it's basically a product that's designed for outdoors. We have the indoor version of it, which is a little bit smaller. We are in the booth that has the blue tower just right outside of the room. You're welcome to come and take a look at these products enclosed. But in this product, we have integrated all the wireless connectivity solutions. We have Wi-Fi, all of the different IoT sensory types of communications, Zigbee, Bluetooth, LoRa. We also have a full-blown server with a data center quality type of a processor to run applications at the edge. And we have a multitude of backhaul solutions, including a connection to a router or fiber cable, as well as 4G backhaul, which is upgradable to 5G when it becomes available in various locations. And we also provide for a 802.11 AD connectivity solution, which is at 60 gigahertz. There's a unique mesh technology that extends the coverage well beyond the standard Wi-Fi mesh or Zigbee mesh. So you can go from one end of the city to another end of the city, even though you lose your throughput or data rate every time you hop. But nevertheless, for small packets of data is very useful. And then lastly, there's a camera, 360-degree camera that has basically a TPU, GPU built into it for crowd monitoring and many of the computer vision applications at the edge. And we are demonstrating that in our booth as well. We are involved in many different smart city applications around the globe at the moment, and we'll be happy to discuss your applications as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The rest of you all forgot your props. Come on. What are you doing? So one of my favorite things about this panel is the diversity of expertise and perspectives that we have on here, despite the commonality of infrastructure and smart cities that ties you all together. And so I'm curious how you all feel that various infrastructure systems, be it edge computing or electric generation, building infrastructure systems, can interact and benefit from each other within a city. And so, Dave, I'll start with you.
Yeah, we're finding it very important, but we're also finding the opportunities and the use cases coming to life due to technology. By the way, I know people's important, but technology helps a little bit as well. But and I'll give you just an example. As we see more renewable energy coming to life, whether it's in buildings or tied to certain infrastructure, that has to connect somehow to something, to the grid. And typically, as you get more and more renewable energy, you need more battery storage. Okay, so as you get more battery storage, you got to do something with that, with that power. And then we're also seeing trends with e-mobility, and you're probably all seeing it. There's more e-cars on the road today than there ever has been. But there's also starting to be big fleets coming into play, for transportation, delivery, and et cetera. So the connectivity of the information, the analytics, and the insight, for example, between buildings who consume energy, but who also can generate it through distributed energy systems, the utility, the e-mobility infrastructure to charge powers, that has to all communicate somehow through a digital grid. And so the insights, the technology, the awareness of what's happening at the utility, at the building, at the edge, this is an example of where we're seeing infrastructure being connected in one use case, associated with I would call it the energy, life cycle kind of infrastructure.
Great. Would anyone have anything to add?
I know technology really becomes the great integrator across all these systems. And when you look back at the smart city framework that I mentioned earlier with Deloitte, one of the things that we're able to see and to do, driving those deep data insights into that, is to be able to break down those silos, connect all those systems in ways where the collaboration across systems and the collaboration of the use of data and the way that the technology can work across multiple parts of a city becomes so important.
The thing that I would want to add, though, is that whilst we try and attempt and look at everything from a technology point of view, the thing that I'm actually quite pleased with is, for those who are working in smart city initiatives, is the bigger trend now that I see that the legal and regulatory infrastructure is being simplified. If I take as a witness, for example, the Curiosity Lab that we've opened at Peachtree Corners today, one of the things that I believe really merits a lot of thought and encouragement is the courage that Peachtree Corners had to put into place a single policy within which entrepreneurs can put their robots, autonomous cars and drones onto a public environment whilst being under a single policy of liability, a regulation that allows them to operate their new technology in the public roads. And it is also that type of entrepreneurial friendliness that we need to create. It's not just the technology infrastructure.
You know, Faye and I were talking before about, you know, this priority of having technology at top of mind, but a common theme we're seeing here at this conference is also having equity at top of mind and making sure that our innovations and our systems are equitable to everyone. And so how are your companies, and how would you suggest that companies and cities make sure that when you're implementing new infrastructure systems, you are making those systems accessible and equitable to everyone in a community? Do you like to start?
Yeah, so I'll hit the last question and this question all at the same time. So just one interesting example I can give you, Kristin, is that in the city of Shanghai, basically the city had a key issue with some of the older infrastructure. And so you have new and old infrastructure that are all mixed up together, especially in Pudong area. And so they wanted to monitor the integrity of some of the historic walls in Pudong, in the Bon, basically, area of Pudong. And effectively, you know, they asked us to put vibration sensors on the walls. We started that project, and then they asked us to effectively put a few more units for monitoring of other IoT sensors. And right next to the area where we are doing these demos and basically monitoring application, there's a tobacco factory that they converted into an accelerator for the startup companies. And because, you know, there are infinite number of smart city applications that ultimately the city management doesn't have the resources to develop on their own. So effectively, you know, they have a lot of startups that are working in this old converted tobacco factory now, that are developing really interesting applications with a lot of machine learning, AI, testing it on our basically product and with the coverage that we provide in that area. And it's one of those best examples of public-private type of partnership, because a lot of financial institutions as well as a lot of companies in Shanghai area are sponsoring a lot of these startups to basically develop some of these applications.
Good. Faye, would you like to speak about making sure that these P3s are put into place in a way that's equitable?
I think with the P3s, you know, the one thing that we've long sort of struggled, I think, a bit with in the P3 world, we have lots of, I think, more simple public-private partnerships that are resident in the smart city space. And some perhaps that are a bit more complicated, but it's that needing to be able to clearly define, you know, the role of the public entities are always going to be to look out for the public interest. The role of the private entity is going to be to, you know, engage in the economic activity, and there's a for-profit motive there, absolutely appropriate. But how we can really bring together really robust P3 kinds of opportunities that successfully engage, I think both of those things is something that we're still working on. The reason, I think it relates all back to the conversation that and the theme that we keep coming back to with regard to equity and inclusion and how P3s can help to support attaining that, is because without inclusion and equity, we really are not the most economically viable cities that we can be. And that's everyone's aim. So this is just a smart business decision.
And that's sometimes in the creation of these P3 partnerships, the debate that is pushed out too much. I think personally we got to be really mindful that when you start your partnerships on the back of a grant or something like that, or an initial infusion of cash, but you don't have an economic model that is cash positive built into the pilot, your pilot will not scale. In the last 3 years, unfortunately, 78% of the initial smart city initiatives did not surpass their pilot phase because of that. And whilst, of course, we need to create benefit for the citizens, and we do, we also need to make sure that we be able to articulate all the way through of actually people willing to pay for it. I mean, you wouldn't want to run a subway line with people not paying for it and you have no real model other than the initial investment and no way to keep it going. And I think sometimes we need to emphasize that economic model a bit earlier in the process and not design a way around it and then figure it out later.
Yeah, I'd like to add to this because I think this is a very important topic and it ties into the last question as well. Because this whole idea of making it equitable, I look at it also from city to city. Because I've been involved with smart cities for I don't know how many years, and it's been, quite frankly, a lot of PowerPoints and a lot of ideas, but the implementation is somewhat difficult because of what? Because of money, because of cash, and taxes are tough. So where I see the big opportunity here is bringing to the market different business models. P3 is one, you talked about it, but there's different types of P3. There's performance-based type implementation. There's X as a service type business models where the city or the residents would pay for usage, so you don't have the large capital up front. And these new types of business models that's coming to the market where companies like ourselves and other companies and third-party investors are investing in these deployments can really make it available to many different types of cities and not just the ones that's flush in cash or has the money to try a pet project. And I think this is very, very important to get some of this implemented. There's still way too much infrastructure being renovated and installed that's not smart, that's dumb, and it's going to be dumb long term because there's the money not available to do this. So I think this new business model is very important.
I think to that end, too, one other thing to add is a lot of what we've seen so far, and probably many of you in the audience have seen, is there's pilots or demonstration projects. We've really got to move beyond, especially in the smart city space. We've got to move to a system-level approach to this and really begin to build out smart infrastructure, really implement, or we're going to continue to be in that cycle of pilots and demonstrations that really aren't changing our communities.
Right. So one thing that I noticed a lot when looking at many different cities, many different projects, there are a few themes that kind of run across all of them, especially as these projects are being rolled out. And one that is increasing in importance is the topic of privacy, security, protection when implementing new systems. And so how can both the public and the private sector work to keep these privacy and security concerns top of mind when entering partnerships or when deploying these systems?
First of all, I think the whole privacy question is becoming ever more imminent because of the fact that there's hardly any smart city initiative anymore that will utilize the combination of cameras and AI. And cameras and AI can be beautiful, but they can also be dangerous. Once a camera has seen and learned something, they can't unseen it. So in that perspective, the design of the privacy at the core of the solution cannot be an afterthought. It needs to be designed upfront, and you need to put yourselves design restrictions at the beginning, and don't first try and design it with freedom and then scale it back to bring privacy in. It's the first thing. The other thing, and that's sometimes a bit sensitive as a topic, we also need to start having the debate, are we willing to give up a little bit of privacy in exchange for security or in exchange for economic value? It is a debate that probably we can't solve on this stage. I just want to say that sometimes we do need to have that discussion too.
Great. And we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to hop to my last question, which is one of my favorites. And as we all know, urban landscapes are evolving rapidly, which is in part due to the evolution of infrastructure and available technologies. So I'd like to hear from each of you on what you think smart cities will look like in 5 to 10 years, really, and more specifically, what challenges and opportunities you think that cities should prepare for. We can start with you, Alan.
Thank you. So one of the examples of what the smart city is going to look like is built right outside of this room in our booth, and you're welcome to come and visit it. So it's a tower that effectively provides for the ability to advertise on each one of the panels of this tower. And effectively, the city can literally use that as a vehicle to effectively not only subsidize the cost of rolling out a smart city type of a network, because that advertising can generate a lot of revenue, but also at the same time effectively use it as a way of providing for small cells and effectively 5G type of wireless coverage to mobile operators by installing these small cells inside of the tower. So there's a whole structure behind it, but effectively, we have taken some measures to also address some of the GPRS types of issues as far as the security is concerned. For Europe, with the camera that's built into these towers, and then at the same time in China and some of those other countries where GPRS is not as much of an issue and they are looking for face recognition and various other things. By virtue of being able to manage these applications at the edge, they can more effectively customize the solution for their exact needs.
In my view, the most beautiful smart city looks just as it looks today. The best technology is the technology that is invisible. I actually think we know today already we can reduce the energy consumption of every building by 58% without changing the climate. That's the type of impactful change that actually will have an enormous benefit. Of course, there will be subtle differences. It will be a bit less crowded in the streets. There will be a little bit less cars that are driving themselves with use of a human, and a little bit more that drives themselves with use of AI. But the real benefit is that we consume less inefficiency from the earth, from each other, and get back that little bit of time that we can then reinvest in either pleasure or other productivity means.
I think if I focus the answer on transportation in particular, I think there's no question that what the future is going to look like is a transportation system, a mobility system that offers significantly more choice than the systems that we have today. And that choice is going to range everything from autonomous and connected vehicles, micro-mobility options, and so forth. But I think all that choice begs two very key things that a smart city needs to be trying to answer now in order to be ready. And the first one is curbside infrastructure management. We typically have thought of our curbside infrastructure in a very traditional way. That's where sidewalks are, maybe parking meters, probably not even smart meters yet, those kinds of things. But the notion of what all is now going to be hosted, what is hosted now with Uber and Lyft and the rideshare services, with sensors, with other kinds of technology deployments that are very necessary, that they not just happen, but they be managed by smart cities, and perhaps even considered as a monetization stream in a new smart city environment. The other piece, besides that sort of curbside infrastructure management and real estate piece, like I said, curbside's a very different piece of real estate now than it was even 5 or certainly 10 years ago, is the notion of parking and what kinds of parking we're building, where we're building it, and whether parking is going to be serving the same kind of activity that it does today. I think that those are two very key things that are going to be different in that future of transportation.
Yeah, I don't know if it's 10, 20, or 50 years, but I think the vision on one hand is resilient, efficient, sustainable, all of those buzz terms that are absolutely fantastic, but could be reality. And what could deliver some of that is, we in Siemens Smart Infrastructure, we think everything's going to be connected. I know we don't like that sometimes when it comes to privacy and security, but I don't see a lot of people getting off their social media or getting off their iPhone and being secure. So I think it's happening and it's coming, and we're starting to see it in the homes. So everything connected, and then when everything's connected, you're going to have a lot of autonomous activities, whether it's vehicles or even buildings, where you're not going to have people sitting in buildings doing repairs. It's going to tell you in advance, predictive, when something's going to happen. You're going to walk out, your car's going to be waiting for you when you walk out of the building to go to the next spot. A lot of things are going to be autonomous, predictive, connected, and then resilient, sustainable. And probably not in 10 years, but it's coming, and it's coming pretty quick. That's our vision.
Great. Well, we obviously don't know what it'll look like in about 10 years, but we know that your companies will all be at the forefront of that change and innovation. So thank you all so much for being with us. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Enjoy the rest of the show.